Some of the scholars mention, in fact, even in dream interpretation, if you saw this companion, Ukasha radiallahu ta'ala anhu, in your dream, then that is a sign that you are going to precede others to something. That's how synonymous his name is with preceding others towards that which is good. When you talk about the mubashirin, those who are guaranteed paradise, sometimes I get asked this question, how come the Prophet ﷺ only guaranteed 10 people paradise? Al-Ashar al-Mubashirin, the 10 promised paradise. And if you have not figured out by now, there are multiple people who the Prophet ﷺ actually promised paradise to and gave that bishara to, that glad tidings to. However, those 10 had a special categorization with the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When it comes to Ukasha radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he is one of those that is considered amongst the Mubashirin, amongst those who was guaranteed paradise by the Prophet ﷺ, but not any type of bishara, not any type of glad tidings. He is given the bishara, he is giving the glad tidings that he is going to enter paradise without any form of questioning, without any form of punishment. So zero accountability when he shows up on the Day of Judgment and enters into Jannah. The story is, of course, a famous one. It's narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu that the Prophet ﷺ stood up, and this is now in Medina. So this is after Ukasha has made hijrah to Medina, and we'll talk about his biography. The Prophet ﷺ says that from my ummah, there is a group of 70,000 people whose faces will glitter as the moon. Their faces will shine as bright as the full moon on the Day of Judgment. And they will enter into Jannah without any form of adhab or any form of hisab. No punishment and no questioning. They will enter into paradise without being punished and without even being questioned. Ukasha radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he got up and he lifted his covering sheet and he said, Ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of Allah, du'ullah an akuna minhum, make dua, ask Allah to make me amongst them. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Anta minhum, you are amongst them. And in one narration, the Prophet ﷺ said, Oh Allah, make him amongst them. And then when he said that, another man from the people of Medina stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, ask Allah that I am amongst them. And the Prophet ﷺ responded famously, Sabaqaka biha Ukasha, Ukasha beat you to it. Ukasha preceded you to it. Now, this narration, which is in Al-Bukhari, the scholars have a few interpretations of it. One of them, which is that this was something that was guaranteed for a small group of people, and Ukasha radiallahu ta'ala anhu stood up, and that other man, while he might have been from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ and maybe from the Ansar as well, as is suggested by the wording of one narration, that he does not reach the level of Ukasha radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Another interpretation, some of the scholars said that the man could have even been from amongst the hypocrites, and so the Prophet ﷺ saying, Ukasha preceded you to it, is that the Prophet ﷺ did not want to include him amongst that group, but this was the Prophet ﷺ's nice way of saying that he would not make dua for him. And because the man is not named, it's okay to entertain either one of those interpretations, that either this was just something special for Ukasha radiallahu ta'ala anhu in that gathering, and that man simply does not make that cut, or the Prophet ﷺ in his high akhlaq, in his high manners and morals, did not include him because he might have been from amongst the hypocrites of Medina instead. So what makes Ukasha radiallahu ta'ala anhu worthy, and this is something that I think is very important, it's not that Ukasha just lucked out in a gathering and said, Ya Rasulullah, make me amongst them. He has a history that he puts behind that request, that talab, right? That request to be included amongst those 70,000. This is an important point, that when you ask Allah for something, you should live your life in accordance with that request, especially when you're talking about His pleasure and His paradise. And this is certainly the case with Ukasha radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So what's his story? Ukasha and his siblings actually embraced Islam early on in Mecca, and none of them were particularly old. So they were all considered amongst the youth when they heard the message of the Prophet ﷺ